Today, Denver Mayor Mike Johnston outlined his goals for the city in 2025, a year that will likely be defined by actions from the Trump administration.
Our Kyle Clark had a chance to talk with the mayor and asked him whether Denver was going to be cooperative with federal authorities conducting arrests in his city.
Let me ask you for a specific scenario, right?
Yes.
But a pretty realistic one. ICE says we're going after those people, right? We've got people that are violent criminals and we want DPD's help. What will DPD do? What will they not do?
Yeah, so what we will do is partner on violent criminals in two ways. One is if ICE notices us and says you have someone in your jail who just is finishing a 4-year sentence for aggravated robbery, we want to know when they're released so we can pick them up. We would coordinate and let them know when they're being released, they can pick them up and deport them. That's one place in which we'll collaborate. The other is if there was a violent criminal at large, if we had someone that had committed an attempted homicide and we hadn't found them yet, we're looking for them. We don't know their status. If ICE calls us and says we're looking for them too, we would jointly pursue that purpose. What we won't do is we're not going to help ICE on a workforce raid of a restaurant. We're not going to help ICE on an act, to raid a church or a hospital or a school. Civil warrants, which means if your only infraction is that you came to the country without documentation, we're not going to enforce that. We're not going to help that. We're not going to pursue that. We don't think that's a public safety risk, and that's not our job.
Kyle's with us now. Much more of that interview is coming up tonight on Next at 6 o'clock. But it seems like everything suddenly, as far as even the Denver's mayor's office, begins and ends with immigration and immigration enforcement.
Right. I mean, the mayor outlined all these plans for 2025,
right.
3,000 affordable housing units, 2,500, summer jobs for kids to keep them out of trouble. 2,000 people moved into permanent housing from a temporary situation. But he acknowledged when he was talking to city workers about their 2025 goals that he wasn't going to be asked about any of that. He was going to be asked about immigration, right? And one of the things to keep in mind is there's a lot of rhetoric around immigration about what's legal, what's not, and so forth. You can have a sanctuary city like Denver. There's no legal definition of the term, but for all intents and purposes, Denver is a sanctuary city because it prohibits some cooperation with ICE. And that can also be totally legal, right? Because the courts have upheld that local jurisdictions are under no obligation to enforce federal immigration law. Now, you've got some conservative-led jurisdictions like Douglas County that want to do it, even saying we're willing to violate state law prohibiting that cooperation just to test the case. Denver wants to continue to test the case law that says Denver doesn't have to help. The difficult part for the mayor is drawing that distinction to remind people that his position and Denver's position has long been, we want violent criminals out, whether or not they are here with legal status or not. But the city is not going to help round up civil immigration violators, meaning people whose only infraction is a civil offense for being here without authorization.
Without the papers they need. Well, he's already caught the eye of the Trump administration, as has a lot of Democrats across the country. They asked him to come back and testify. And what are his thoughts now? What's he saying about that?
Well, the real question is whether he's going to go voluntarily or whether he is going to require House Republicans to drag him in there via subpoena, right? You can't just give a middle finger to Congress. Like, that's not going to work out well for you in the end. I asked him today, are you going to go willingly or are you going to make House Republicans force you to go there? And he says, well, we're having discussions about what the testimony looks like. I presume, I do not know, that's who's up there on the panel with me, how long is the questioning going to last, what materials am I going to provide, so on and so forth. Just picture this scene, right? He's going in to talk to the House Oversight Committee. That's Lauren Boebert. That's Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's Jim Jordan, right? These are some of the people who are most adept at making politics for TV. And one thing the mayor said to me today is, if this is theater for theater's sake, I don't want to go. Sorry, dude. The question isn't whether you want to go. The question is, will you go on February 11th when they have asked you to come, or will you get dragged back on another occasion?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about, because Representative Jordan was one who did ignore subpoenas, and some of those House Republicans have ignored subpoenas under the prior administration. So does he have that option to just say, yeah, thanks, no?
Tom, you've noticed that the law is for some people.
Not everyone.
And not for everyone. So, yeah, selective enforcement, right, perhaps? At the end of the day, he says he is open to going to Congress, right? He's going to be there one way or the other. Importantly, he insists that he's not ashamed of anything that Denver does and that he's ready to defend what Denver does. He also understands, as does anybody, what's going to happen if he goes to Congress.
Right.
Which is, it's going to be a made-for-TV show.
Does he he has the support of Denver of the citizens, of the city council, of those people in and around this city that say you're doing the right thing and we'll stand with you? Or there must be factions in Denver who say, no, you should open the doors and help?
That's interesting. That's a good question. I've never asked him that. I'll write it down and I'll ask him. I think what he would say, right, having interviewed him twice in the last 2 weeks, talked about this with him since he ran for office, even before he ran for mayor, right, is that he believes that Denver has struck the right balance, right? That if you've committed a violent crime, out. If you haven't committed a violent crime, you deserve the chance to go before a judge and plead your case. That's Denver's position. He's clearly very comfortable with Denver's position because every time I talk to him, I ask him, you changing anything about the way the city operates or are you just reinforcing it? And he has again and again said, nope, we're doing the same thing that we've always done. This is what we believe in.
Well, we'll get much more of that discussion coming up at 6 o'clock on Next. Thanks for taking a few minutes joining us.
The boss told me I had to.
Oh, that
Now
worked.
go back to work.
It was a
Okay.
subpoena.
Yeah, that's what that it was.
You had no choice.